You're listening to the Vol Basketball Fever Podcast, your source for news, discussion, and debates about the Vols and Lady Vols basketball programs. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Hello, everyone. Welcome in to another episode of the Lady Vol Basketball Fever Podcast. I am Nathanael Rutherford, joined by the great Maria Cornelius here back again. And Maria, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's my fault. It's been a little while since we've done a Lady Vol basketball podcast, and I apologize for that. I didn't really want to. It was Christmas break and all certain stuff, and Lady Vols were playing, some lower tier non-conference play. And I thought I'll wait till we get the SEC play to talk about Lady Vols and do a full-on show about them. So who better to bring back on than Maria, who helped me launch this podcast for the Lady Vols specific one. So really excited to have you on here. A lot's happened. Again, I want to plug the show here. A lot of you may be watching this on YouTube because we have YouTube now. And the last Lady Vol episode was also a video podcast, which I had Kelly and Stitz of WATE6 on. So big thank you to her again. So if you're on YouTube, you can like this video, share it, subscribe while you're here as well. If you're just listening to the audio of it, thank you so much. Regardless how you're listening to it, watching it, please share with your friends. We really appreciate you guys all listening and tuning in. But Maria, since we last talked, we talked before the season began, there's been a lot's happened, obviously. But over the last week, Lady Vols picked up two really impressive, really nice wins. They hosted Alabama and got a home victory against Alabama to open up SEC play without Jordan Horston and, of course, without Rae Burrell. And then this weekend, Rae Burrell returned. She came in, I think it was late in the first quarter against Arkansas on the road, immediately drained a bucket, and then ended up, didn't make it after that, but played just a few minutes, just trying to get the legs back under her. Horston was obviously a little rusty as well from missing practice and everything, but she came in, and now we have a cat sighting here for all the ones on the video. But then Horston comes back in, and she's a little rusty. Really, though, the story I think of this weekend was Tamari Key's stellar fourth quarter performance, Jordan Walker hitting the three. But really, I just want to talk about these two games in general before I get into specifics. Maria, I don't think you could have asked for a better start in SEC play for Lady Vols. They go on the road and get a really tough victory against what I think is a very good Arkansas team. And they host Alabama without their two stars playing in that game and win that one. And they ended up, in that one pulling away late. That one was another game that was close going into the fourth quarter. Lady Vols trailed and, going into the fourth quarter against Arkansas won. This team is the cardiac kids is what I think we've all started calling them. But I just kind of get your thoughts, as a whole on those two games and how the Lady Vols have started SEC play right now.
That's the way you want to start. I mean, every conference win is precious. You get a win on the road, it's pure gold. I've always said you've got to hold your home court and steal as many wins as you can on the road. And yes, Nathaniel, I wholeheartedly agree. Arkansas is a tough place to play. And Amber Ramirez put up 26. I think the last time she played Arkansas at Tennessee, she put up 29. So there's something about her when she sees orange, she's ready to go. And that's a tough game. It's Jordan Horston, of course, had missed 2 weeks of practice because of the Christmas break. She missed 2 straight games. She didn't play in Chattanooga game on Monday either. It's the Lady Vols' third game of the week. I mean, you start getting tired at that point. That's 3 games in 1 week. Even if the first one, you were able to go deep in your bench, that was good that Kelly was able to use pretty much everybody she had available, which I guess would have been 10 players at that point, or 11 at that point. I'm trying to count here in my head. Tennessee hasn't been full strength hardly at all this season. I mean, even the first game that Jordan Horston missed because of her ankle injury where Rae got hurt. I mean, so Tennessee really hasn't been at full strength for any game until sort of Sunday against Arkansas when Rae made her appearance. Now, Rae, she has been off the court since November 10th. She is trying, is she rusty? Absolutely. She's trying to get her, legs under her wind, get back in the flow of basketball. But it was impressive that she caught that ball, and it was nothing but net. That was a beautiful shot. Her toe just nicked the line. It was ruled a 3 and then overruled as a 2 when they went back to review it at halftime. But it was a vintage Rae shot. And And Kelly said after the game that what she needs, Rae needs to get back in the flow. She needs to get not so much confidence, but just get the muscle memory back and the basketball back and see how that knee responds. I mean, she's going to have to go full go in practice. I'm sorry, this cat was asleep. It's a peanut. She's going to have to go full go in practice, several times a week and see how that goes, see how she feels. But it's certainly a great positive step in the right direction for Tennessee if she can use the month of January to get back acclimated to basketball, because that elevates Tennessee's roster tremendously. If your senior forward and she was, started the season on every preseason watch list there was, I mean, that would elevate Tennessee tremendously.
Yeah. And my next question is about her return, because I know she only played 12 minutes, but when she's out there, it seemed like for the most part, the offense was more open. It seemed like, maybe while her shots weren't falling, she only took a handful, but other players were getting more opportunities. And it seemed like for a little bit there, it kind of provided a little burst of offense. And that's what I think this Lady Vol team has missed more than anything other than free throw shooting, has been those bursts of offense when they go stagnant. She didn't play a whole lot in the second half. When she was in there the first half, that's when I noticed that, hey, they're starting to pick up some points here. And I thought they could actually eclipse 70. They did end up getting 70, which they haven't done a ton this year. But I think, what do you think is the plan? I don't know if Coach Harper said anything after the game about it, but what do you think is the plan for Rae moving forward? How slowly do you think they're going to try to implement her back into the lineup? When do you think we'll see her back in the starting lineup? What do you think?
What Kelly said after the game is she needs live reps. That is the only thing that can get her back ready. Now, she said we can get a lot of those in practice 5-on-5. Then the key becomes what it becomes with any player returning to the lineup. How does your knee respond? Are you having any soreness, any swelling, any tenderness? How are you feeling the next day? When you come into practice, are you ready to go? I mean, injuries are not anything. I mean, you have to pay attention to them. She has an incredible future ahead of her as a professional athlete, and you have to be very careful with that. I think Rae very much wants to play this season, and you have to be careful that she doesn't push herself beyond a point that is not in her best interest. So it's always a tough balance. And that's why if you're a head coach, and Pat did this too, turn it over to Jenny Moshak, you turn it over to your medical staff, because you're not qualified to make that call. Head coaches know that. And if they say she can go, then Kelly will play her. How quickly will all depend on how practice goes. And the Lady Vols are obviously home this Thursday against Texas A&M, and then you got 2 more games on the road. And anytime you have consecutive travel games, that takes away from practice time on your own home court, because you got to allow time for travel. So I think the process will be slow. We saw her warm up against Alabama. Obviously, she was in the layup line and warming up. She looked rusty then. It was apparent that it didn't really look like Kelly was intended to play her against Alabama, but she wanted her to go through the warm-up process. It's like baby steps to getting back. Then she puts her in the game against Arkansas. She hits that first shot. Rae is an outstanding free throw shooter. Of course, she missed the 2 she took, because you've just been away from competition for so long. I mean, that's muscle memory of getting, okay, what's my routine? What did I do? I mean, she'll get that right back. I'm not worried about Rae will hit 85% going forward. And that will help Tennessee tremendously, because that's somebody you could have in late in a close game, because she's going to hit her free throws. So I think the game plan will be ease her in, see how she does, see how it goes, and basically leave it up to her, her performance, how she feels physically, and go from there. I mean, if she were to fully come back, it would be hard to envision her not returning to the starting lineup. I mean, Most coaches say you don't lose your spot by injury. I mean, you can lose it by performance, but not by injury. So I would think when she reached that point, she would return to it. And given the aches and pains and nicks and illness and everything that can happen to a basketball team, you never know what the starting lineup will be, as everybody saw this week with Horston not available to go because of a non-COVID illness that was specified immediately. But obviously returned for Arkansas. And Kelly said she looked winded in that first quarter. I mean, been off the court for 2 weeks, essentially. You don't just, I don't care how young you are, you don't just step back onto the basketball speed after you've been out, particularly with any kind of respiratory issue. I mean, that takes a toll on, I don't know how these kids play with the flu. I've heard of these flu games. I'd be curled up in a fetal position. I'm not playing with the flu. I can't even get up.
I'm right there with you, man. The athletes and their grittiness and their ability to push through things like working what I do, just, working in front of a computer when I'm sick doesn't feel great. I don't know how they go out there and run around and jump and do all the stuff they do when they're sick. That did remind me, just really briefly, on a funny note, lighter note. I saw, I didn't catch it during the game, but I saw the video clip from SEC Network, and also I think it was Jordan was asked about it. The little assist there that Coach Harper gave Jordan when she fell onto the sideline and helped her get back into the court. Did Coach Harper have anything to say about that? I know Jordan did. And
no,
if anyone didn't hear it, you can say what she said too.
We didn't ask her about it after the game. One thing about post games on the road is they are quick. The player, I mean, they're trying to catch a flight, and you are going as fast as you can to get through it. And because we interviewed Kian and Tamari and then Kelly, of course. And, you have to do one by one there in front of the screen. So we're going as fast as we can. But I did see Jordan's tweet where she said, "Don't let the skinny arms fool you," talking about Kelly. She's got a lot of strength. I mean, Kelly, she got her right back up. She managed to push her back on the court right as the ball was getting turned over, went right to Jordan. And Kelly could have gotten a technical had she stepped on the floor, but she managed to keep her shoes on the sideline, in the coach's area. It was just a well-executed play there by Kelly and Jordan.
Yeah, she used some of that old point guard vision and point guard footwork that she had back in the day to realize where she was. But to get back on the court and to look back at a couple of these games, I think someone who's been pivotal, especially in the Arkansas game, and you look at the fourth quarter, that was Tamari Key. I've been particularly impressed with her, the way she's grown offensively. She still has steps to take, obviously, but she's been a much more consistent offensive threat this year than she has any years past. And I think that she, to me, I can't remember who we were talking before the season, if you said it was her, but I know when I talked to Kellyanne a couple weeks ago, we were talking about kind of the keys to the big Stanford game, and we were talking about Tamari Key being the big key for that one. I think, to me, Tamari is potentially the big difference maker for the Lady Vols in SEC play, because you don't have very many teams that can match up with her size, obviously on defense. But I think offensively, there's a couple of times in that game against Arkansas, that one drive to the basket she made, I think it was Horston or Walker, made the perfect pass to her, and she made the perfect just layup and got fouled and made the free throw. I mean, that was a beautiful textbook like WNBA play, and that was such a professional play. And her free throw shooting was really good against Arkansas. So I just think her growth overall, to me, Maria, she's been my, I guess technically Jordan Horston's been the one who's impressed me most, but I didn't know, is Tamari the person who's impressed you the most? Because she's right up there with Jordan Horston for me in terms of who's impressed me the most in this, first half of the season, basically.
I will say what she's done has been very impressive. Am I surprised? No. You could see it in her. I have learned over the years that post players, you've got to really wait till their junior year to see what they can be. It is a hard league to be a freshman in. The physicality, they're not used to it. They have never been hit in the post like that in their life. And if they did, they certainly got a foul call, and you're not going to get them in the SEC. And you need a couple summers in the weight room to really get ready for the physicality of this league. One player I could compare it to, though, Izzy is shorter. She's 6'3". Izzy Harrison is a freshman, was going to do one of two things. She was going to shoot the ball, whether she was open or not, or she was going to turn it over, typically with an offensive charge. She became an outstanding post player in college, and also became a WNBA draft pick, and is still playing in the WNBA. And that was a case of a player just getting better. Now, Tamari, she came in listed at 6'5". Now, the player she was going against, Jersey Wolfenbarger, is a 6'5" freshman for Arkansas. She's a post and somebody who could shoot threes. She struggled against Tamari, but I will say Jersey Wolfenbarger is going to be an excellent player in this league. That's the difference in a freshman going against a junior. I mean, Tamari's stronger. She's more savvy. She knows how to get around her. And I know Tamari's conceding now to being 6'6". I'm going to put her at 6'7". I mean, she has developed into a player that I'm not surprised, but I am impressed because she's even ahead of where I thought she could be as a junior. I mean, at this point, she goes out next season in the class of graduates in class of 2023 in college. She could be the number 1 draft pick. I mean, absolutely no doubt. You don't find 6'7" with that shot blocking ability, the ability to hit shots, the ability to finish. And she made it a point this season to work on her free throw shooting. And she's got herself to about 70%, which is you want to post 70 or higher. So I am very impressed with what Tamari has done. And I agree with you. Absolutely key to this season. The upperclassmen had to step up. Absolutely. Jordan Walker, Alexis Dye, even though she hasn't played in the SEC, she's got a ton of college experience. Kean Green, Rae Burrell, who they lost, unfortunately 20 minutes into the season, Jordan Horston and Tamari Key. Those players, we're going to get the bulk of the minutes. And I want to give a shout out to Jessie Rennie and Emily Saunders. They stayed at Tennessee. The coaching change, that was the junior class. They all stayed, they all came. And when Jessie and Emily are on the floor, they give Tennessee what they've got. They give quality minutes, they do their job. And that's one thing Kelly has really done with this team, is made every player on that roster feel like you are a part of this team. You have a role. We need you. And it keeps everybody engaged. And so shout out to Kelly, because that's not easy. Minute management is not easy for any head coach, because every kid wants to play. And if you didn't want to play, why did you're not a competitor. So coaches understand it.
Absolutely. And I'll say too, that's what's probably my favorite piece of content after every time the Lady Vols win, is when they put out on Twitter the video of Coach Harper and then her assistant coaches and husband and everybody coming in and high-fiving and hooting and hollering with the whole team. Like, it's not just individual players or congratulating, you're doing the entire team. And it's obviously easier to do that with basketball than it is in football or sports like that. But it just, like you said, it shows that she wants to build that camaraderie. She wants to build that culture. And that I think that's been the biggest thing, is trying to reshape that culture. And I think it's there. I think that culture of team, of family, more or less, is there. I think that's huge for this team. You can tell they care about each other, that they root for each other, and that, they're playing for more than themselves. They're playing for the team. They're playing for their coach. They're playing for the name on their jersey. So I think that's a very good point. And that also, I had a follow-up question kind of to that, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, about freshmen, because I remember seeing someone on Twitter mentioning that, come to Tennessee, because if you're a freshman, you're good enough. And the coaches trust you. They're going to play you in for the fourth quarter when the game matters the most, because you've seen it multiple games this year. Fourth quarter, you've had one or maybe two or maybe even three freshmen. And that was one thing I remember you and I were talking about before the season, Maria, is you don't have to start and you don't have to play freshmen this year like you had in years past. But these freshmen, some of them are good enough to actually play and warrant minutes in the fourth quarter. We've seen that time and time again. This year with Sarah Puckett, with Brooklyn Miles, and even some with Kaya Wind sometimes too. But specifically with Brooklyn and Puckett, they've played a lot of minutes in games this year. I think, to me, that's been another thing that I've been very interested to see how it continues once we get into SEC play and deeper into SEC play, is how many more minutes they keep playing. But I think, to me, seeing what these freshmen are doing and kind of how quickly they're learning, how quickly they're picking things up, that to me has been also very impressive.
I agree. And Caroline Strickland, I want to bring her up too, if only because I hope she keeps her head up. Right now, she projects to a post player with what they're working with right now. Now, she could become a stretch forward too, but right now she's playing behind Tamari Key, Kean Green, and Alexis Dye, of course, two seniors in that mix. And freshman post players, and Izzy had to learn it too. Izzy wanted to play. She was upset when she wasn't playing. I mean, you're just not used to it. You were the it factor in high school, and suddenly you're the 11th or 12th player in the game. And that's hard to deal with. And Caroline Strickland has an incredible skill set. She is, how they used to call the Lady Vols that won the national title, the corn-fed chicks. That's what and this is a compliment. Caroline Strickland, she is an immovable force in that paint. She is physical. She mixes it up. she beautiful free throw shooter. I mean, she's basically 100% free throw shooter almost. I mean, she just repeatable for, and for
she's 13 to 14 this year. So yeah, basically almost 100%.
She can flat out shoot free throws and she can hit shots. So that's a player. I'm like, just stay patient, keep working. Your time is coming. You're going to be an outstanding post player at Tennessee. So, but I agree. We discussed the fact that the freshmen can help. They have got to help this team. And obviously Sarah Puckett had to step in when Jordan Horston was out. She did well. I think Arkansas sort of opened their eyes a little bit more to the physicality of the league and how you're not going to get calls on the road and you are going to have to deal with that. And the fact that a team that you may not know much about, they don't know these teams. I mean, they've never played them before. Everything was new to them. They don't know the gyms. And I wonder too about the cold, because it was like 18, 19 degrees in Fayetteville. Fayetteville in January just doesn't seem like where I'd want to be. And sometimes those gyms can be cold. And I wonder sometimes if that affects, it can affect shooting big time. But it's for freshmen. Pat used to say every moment a teaching moment. And that is particularly true for freshmen.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that's why I'm really curious too, to see like how these freshmen continue on in SEC play, because we've basically just kind of dipped our toe into the waters of SEC play. We're 2 games in, again, 2 nice, impressive victories for Lady Vols, but they do play a Texas A&M squad that's not as good as A&M's been in recent past, but they're still the team you can't just take lightly and can't look over.
No.
Then you go, like you said, on the road at Ole Miss, at Vanderbilt, and then you host Kentucky. You go at on the road against Georgia, and on the road against Auburn. So you have 1 home game after this A&M game sandwiched in between 4 road contests. I don't care how good or bad the competition is on some of those games. That's rough. I mean, that is a rough slate of
and all of those teams. I mean, everybody in the SEC can beat one another. I mean, look what happened to South Carolina. Missouri was down several players because of COVID, and look what happened. Lost in overtime. I mean, Ole Miss took Tennessee to the absolute wire last season in Knoxville and has everybody back and has added players. So, and Texas A&M, I mean, they're a tough team. Gary Blair, it's his last season. You know, he's retiring after this. Tennessee has lost 3 consecutive games to Texas A&M. They lost there, of course. Like that was the infamous snow game where they didn't get home for 4 days.
Yep.
The last time they won was 2018, and they lost the 2 previous games before that. So they're 1-5 against LSU in the last 6 games. I mean, against Texas A&M in the last 6 games. LSU, obviously, they've beaten several times. It's A&M is always a problem. They're going to see a very similar style of play, very aggressive, very physical team. And the strategy for opposing coaches is that we can't match up with Tennessee size, so we're just going to foul them because they can't possibly call all of them. And they didn't. I mean, even though 5 Arkansas players fouled out, it could have happened like in the 3rd quarter had they called all of them. Yeah. But that's the reality of the SEC.
Yes, I remember laughing because I was like, it seems like everybody in Arkansas is fouling out. Once we got into the 4th quarter, they had basically almost all their starters were just gone. It was funny, but I mean that was to go back to a point you and I were talking about before that we started recording the podcast here. Like I think it maybe even mentioned at the top of the podcast, like this Lady Vols squad are the cardiac kids. And I was texting with a friend of mine about the team, and they're like, you know, if they would only just hit their free throws, maybe we would be in the situation in the 4th quarter. I was like, you're right. But also, I think it also does speak to this team's resilience. And I think I talked about it last episode with Kellyanne, where I said, you know, unless this team's down by like 20 points going in the 4th quarter, I'm not counting them out. Like you can be down 10, 12, 13, 14 points going into the 4th quarter. And I think this team has a chance to win it. You look at Arkansas, they weren't down by 8 heading into the 4th, but they were down by 8 at some point like late in the 3rd quarter in that game. And I still thought, don't let it get to double digits. And I think this game is still very winnable. And then lo and behold, they go out and you know, use a lot of free throws and draw a lot of fouls, but they still did. Like, Tamari did a fantastic job. Jordan Walker did a fantastic job. And that team came back and won. They came back and won in the second half against Alabama. They've come back and won multiple times this year, and late in the 3rd and the 4th. I think that to me it doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem like they're just kind of lagging behind and all of a sudden they turn it on in the fourth. It just seems like they hit a different gear in the fourth. Is that accurate? Am I wrong? Or does it seem like to you? How do you view it?
I wholeheartedly agree. Kelly has them believing in themselves and understand it. A lot of this team, they're starting to take on Kelly's personality, and that starts at the top. I've heard it said before, and there's some truth to it. Coaches can win or lose in the fourth quarter. And some of that is not just who you have on the floor, it's how you act in the huddles. And Kelly made a calculated gamble. Now, the foul calling was atrocious. And I mean, I've been saying that. I've been covering the league 20-something years. I've said it every season. Was this particularly perplexing? Yes. But guess what? It's going to happen again. Yeah. And they were frustrated. You could read the body language. Tamari even said after the game, I was frustrated. I was irritated. And Kelly basically said, she said it was right near the end of the third or right in that first time out of the fourth quarter. She basically said, quit complaining, quit whining, get over it, go play. We know how the game's being called. The game's been established. Go deal with it, take care of it. And she said this team, true to fashion, when we asked them to do something, they tried their best to go do it, and they turned it around. Now, I mean, that's a coaching call. As to do you tell your team, I'm sorry, I know the calls are bad? No, you tell them, get over it, quit whining, go play. There's nothing we can do about it. So that you got to make a call of what your team needs to hear at that moment. And Kelly has certainly struck the right note. I mean, adversity is going to come in the SEC. Heck, it's already come. You had to come back against Alabama. You had to come back on the road. The SEC is a tough, brutally tough conference night in and night out. I mean, Florida was leading Georgia all the way through that game and lost late in the fourth quarter. Florida was a team that struggled last season. I think I can't remember where they finished. It wasn't last place because Vanderbilt ended their season because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And speaking of COVID, the other good thing, and Kelly's aware of this, is the system in place now for COVID-19 cancellations. If you have 7 players and at least 1 coach, you got to go. Yep. You need to play. You don't know who those 7 might be because of contact tracing. You may have 2 starters and the rest bench players. So it behooves a coach to get everybody on that squad ready for this SEC slate, because you're not really sure game to game who might be available depending on contact tracing or quarantining.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And like you said, you've been able to, thankfully for the Lady Vols, have been able to play a lot of these players, especially early on, but even here in the SEC with the games, like you said, with Jordan Horston and Rae Burrell being out for the Alabama game, you're able to play some of those bench players in that game and get the win. So it's a bonus. You have learning opportunities and you got the win. So it's like, that's like a win. That's like an ultimate win for a coach is, yes, we got the win and we have all this stuff on film. We can go back and correct, not just with our starters and regular players, but for our 7th, 8th, 9th players on the bench there. So that was super important. And also against Arkansas, you had some players come in because of different foul trouble stuff that, played different minutes and stuff too. And I that's a very good point, because you don't know. And I talked about this in the last podcast with Gene, not just the regular Vol basketball fever, because the men's team had Fulkerson and Kenny Chandler out against the Alabama game. And I said, every team this year, I feel like in men's and women's both, are basically every team I think is going to have at least one game they quote unquote lose because of COVID, because you're going to have people get it and you're going to have, a couple starters out or a couple really key players out. I hope it doesn't happen to Lady Vols, but there's a very good chance it could happen. Down the line, they could have, like you said, playing with just 2 starters basically, because a couple other people are out because of COVID or other injuries. So it can absolutely happen. That's where like you said, it comes down to coaching and getting your players prepared. And it comes down to the players, taking that coaching, receiving it, and being prepared themselves and not taking it lightly. And like you said, I think this team has taken on the personality of Coach Harper. And I think she's not one to approach anything lightly and lazily. And I think just from watching this team and how they interact and stuff, I think they've taken that same personality on too.
She's very efficient, very mathematical with her calculations. She has practice plans that she's prepared and she's ready. She knows what she wants to do. She has a plan. She's had a plan since she got here. And I kept telling people, and this was pre-COVID, I had no idea she was going to deal with a pandemic. And this is her 3rd year and she's dealt with a pandemic all 3 seasons that she's been here. I said, the first season, you're just trying to get your arms around everything. Everything's new, your staff, the program, your players. I said, the second season, you'll see growth. I said, if you're going to judge Kelly, and I say that loosely because, I mean, fans do. I don't. I can't draw up an inbounds play. I'm not going to judge Kelly's coaching ability when I can't even do that effectively. But if you're going to evaluate Kelly, maybe that's a nicer word because judge can sound harsh. Mm-hmm. Sounds judgmental, no pun intended. Wait till the third season. Then you'll start to see what she's trying to do, what she is working towards. Now, did I expect 13-1 and number 7 in the country, 2-0 going into the SEC going into first of the year? No, particularly if you told me, oh, you're going to lose Rae Burrell in the first half of the season opener, it'd be like, oh my goodness, right. This is going to be tough. And their only loss. So, I mean, I'm not saying they're going to run through the SEC. The league is just too brutal, but their only loss in non-conference was Stanford, a team that they nearly picked off, just couldn't get over that hump in the third quarter and then into the fourth. But so I think fans are now seeing okay, this is what Kelly's plan is. This is her vision. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, you better win this and you better win that and you better make a deep run in the NCAA. I've got to see matchups. What's the team's health at that point? Where are they at? Where are other teams at? I will say this, for the first time in a long time, it's been a long time coming. I feel like Tennessee is in and can compete in every single game it plays. And over the years, there were some matchups I'm like, Tennessee's going to have to be a tremendous effort and breakdowns by the other team. I said Tennessee can play, but I went into multiple games thinking they were very much a long shot to win.
I 100% agree with you on that one. You put into words kind of how I felt and didn't realize that's how I felt until just now. Like I don't think like you said, I don't expect this team to win every game, like, because that's just not, that's no one says it's not possible, because it is possible, but it's very unlikely to happen. But I'm not expecting them going into it saying, okay, they have to have like 1,000 things break their way to win this game. It's not the case anymore. They can beat UConn, they can beat South Carolina, they almost beat Stanford. So I don't expect them to go into a game needing the other team to play one of their worst games of the year and Tennessee to play one of their best for the Lady Vols to win. Like you're right. I think they are going to be competitive in every single game they play. Now, are they going to slip up and maybe lose a game they quote unquote shouldn't? Probably, because I'm going to get to the next topic here. You mentioned it earlier. I think this might be the deepest the SEC's been potentially in women's basketball, because like you just brought up, a shorthanded Missouri team just upset South Carolina in crazy fashion. That was an exciting game, and that layup at the buzzer there in overtime to win. That's not it. Like, I mean, that's not the only thing. You look at how good LSU is playing right now. They're just like Lady Vols. They have one loss. I mean, there's a depth to this conference that I don't know that has been there in years past. Now, is it the deepest conference ever? I don't know, but it still is a conference that I think the 9th, 10th team in the standings can beat the 3rd, 4th, maybe even 2nd team in the standings. Like I think anyone can beat anyone for the most part on any given night. And that's why I'm excited to see the way the Lady Vols play in SEC this year, because they're going to get tested basically every single night they play. And I'm excited because I'll ask you, Maria, you've obviously watched a lot more basketball than I have. Is this the deepest you've seen the SEC? Yes. Okay. It has been progressing that way for several years. Some old time fans get upset when I say this, because, it's easy to forget the situation, like Pat Summitt. We deify Pat Summitt, and in many regards we should, but sometimes it can get exaggerated in terms of the situation. People were saying, well, Pat always played the toughest non-conference teams. And I'm like, yeah, that's because there were about 2 teams in the SEC that she thought could really beat them. She would load up that non-conference schedule because she needed those games to test her team, because she knew the SEC. I mean, and it varied from year to year. I mean, sometimes it was Georgia, sometimes it's LSU, sometimes it was Auburn. Vanderbilt at some point was particularly troublesome at times too. But you never had that top to bottom depth. You had games that you knew Tennessee could win by 25 if they, even on a decent night, you knew they were going to win. That there was no way that team had the athletes or the shooters or anybody to stay with them. Now
you can go to a place like Florida, like Georgia did, which is a very good team, and get taken to the wire by a very good Florida team. It's just, it literally is true. And if you didn't believe it, and I know you do, if you don't, you do now after seeing South Carolina, the number one team in the country, lose at Missouri in overtime, because that is SEC basketball.
Right, exactly. And I'm looking here at the latest updated AP poll that came out. We're recording this on Monday night here, so it came out earlier today. Just going to list off all the SEC teams in there, because you have Tennessee at 7. I'm going to scroll down. You have LSU at 13 because they moved up. You have Georgia at 15. You also have Kentucky at 21. And then you have Texas A&M now hanging on there at number 25. And you also have receiving votes. You have Missouri. And then I want to say you had one more, maybe not, but that's a solid group.
And then South Carolina at the top.
Oh yeah, I totally skimmed by them for some reason. Yeah, South Carolina at the top. So that's a solid, about almost half, I think maybe exactly half of the SEC that is either in the top 25 or is receiving votes in the top 25 or in the AP poll. So I mean, again, it's a very deep league. It's going to be. I don't know that the Lady Vols, and like you mentioned, that doesn't even include the fact that you have an Ole Miss team that, like you said, took the Lady Vols to the wire last year and returned all those players. And by all accounts, is not a bad team this year either. I mean, it's going to be a tough schedule. But again, as you just said, Lady Vols already played a tough schedule in non-conference and came out with one loss. And they did that without Rae Burrell. I mean, like you said, I was not expecting them to come out there, be, one loss team at this point. But especially if you told me when you and I were doing the podcast at the beginning of the year, we had both talked about, we knew that Rae Burrell was going to be out for basically the first month and a half of the year. I'd say there's no way they have one loss. I'd say, okay, they're going to lose to Stanford. They're going to lose this game. They're probably going to lose that game. They're probably, lose 3, maybe even 4 non-conference games. They didn't. They beat every team but Stanford, and they still have beaten every team they've played but Stanford. It's really, I'm trying not to get too sunshine and roses and be a sunshine pumper here, but it's been very impressive. And I'm expecting them to lose a couple more games here and there, because it's just going to happen. But because you're going to have an off night where the shots aren't falling, and the other team is going to be able to penetrate your defense and has you just have a bad matchup with them. It's just going to happen. That's basketball. You very rarely nowadays, especially, have undefeated teams in basketball. Especially now with the women's game, with it being a lot more parity than it was even just 10 years ago. It's very, very hard to be undefeated in women's basketball now too. But this team, like you said, this is the most confidence I've had in a Lady Vols team in years. And that in itself is just a big victory to me, in my opinion, as someone who grew up watching the Pat Summitt Vols and watching them win, a couple of national titles, and watching Candace Parker and watching those teams. Like, it's really nice to feel confident again and say, hey, even if they don't win this game, I don't feel like they're going to, have an embarrassing loss. They're going to go out and compete, and it's going to be close. And I'm going to say, okay, they gave it their best shot. Go on to the next one, and it's win the next one.
It is so hard to run the table in the SEC. Yeah. I know South Carolina's done it recently. Tennessee's done it. It is so very, very hard, because everything, just one play can go wrong at the end of a game. It is so hard to run the table. And I don't think any SEC, every SEC coach goes into a season wanting to do so, but I think realistically they know. I guarantee you South Carolina was shocked. Now they've already bounced back from that loss. And I guarantee you they were shocked to go to Missouri and lose. But it just goes to show, I mean, Missouri and Tennessee games have been nail biters. It's fun. If you love women's college basketball, it is a heck of a league to watch, because every game is just outstanding players, which brings us back to the freshmen. It's a veteran league too. You got a lot of 6-year players like Kayla Pointer at LSU. I guess, technically, I think she had the ACL injury and came back. It's her 5th year of being on the court.
Right.
Alexis Dye came out of Troy. This is her 5th year of basketball. She would have been out of eligibility if not for COVID, but she wisely took that extra year. Keegan had the injury year anyway, so this isn't an extra. Jordan Walker, this isn't an extra year for her. This is only her 4th on the court, because she missed a full season at Central Michigan with a torn ACL. So, and that brings me to another point about Kelly, because you look at some of the players I just rattled off. Alexis Dye, Troy University. Keegan Green, Liberty University. Jordan Walker, Central Michigan. a lot of people, and I heard this from a lot of folks that were worried about, well, Kelly's coached at mid-majors, Missouri State. She was at NC State. That was, Western Carolina, NC State. NC State was several years ago. Now, of course, Missouri State to here. Can she coach at the Power Five? And I think what we're seeing now is Kelly has had to do a lot with players who were not as talented. That makes you a better coach. You have got to get more out of player. I mean, the 4 stars and the 5 stars, they come in with the talent. You got to figure out how to manage it, get them coachable, get them up to the college speed. Some of these overlooked kids, you got to do it with your coaching and their desire. And I mean, you've got 3 players who just play with so much heart, and Alexis Dye, Jordan Walker, and Kean Green. And look where they started from. And Kelly has shown the ability to get the maximum that she can out of players who weren't that, heralded. I mean, if you had said 3 years ago, they're going to have Alexis Dye and Jordan Walker and Kean Green, people would have gone, who? I mean, unless you really take a deep dive into women's basketball, you would not have known much about those players, because those schools don't get that attention. Even Kean Green, the one time she played here, was first round of the NCAA tournament, and it was, what she remembers is it was a 40-point loss. and now she's playing for the Lady Vols. So that is one thing I've noticed about Kelly. And partly, I think she's an outstanding coach. She's still got that point guard mentality. But number 2, she has had to do it. I mean, she got to a Sweet 16 with a Missouri State team that I think most Power 5 fans would be hard-pressed to name a single starter on that team. Mm-hmm. It beat Iowa State at Iowa State, which is not easy to do. That is a legendary program. Bill Finley's been there for years. And had she had a better shooter, she might have picked off Stanford that year. But so I think you're seeing Kelly can coach. There is I think anybody had any questions about her coaching ability, that should have been put to bed already. Now, imagine her starting to get some of that top talent rolling in. I mean, right now there's one McDonald's All-American. Those don't mean a whole lot to me, but they mean a lot to a lot of people. And Jordan Horston, she's the only one. Tamari Key not being a McDonald's high school All-American and now looks foolish, but she was not. And there's only one on Tennessee's roster. And imagine and Kelly is not just like picking out, okay, talent, I want that. She's looking at fit. She is very big on fit and culture and the way a player performs on and off the court. Kelly said champions on the court, they tend to be, she's looking at how does your high school. Now she understands if you maybe play in a high school that is a small rural high school, I mean, you can't do much, but what do you do with what you have? Right. So when she, I figured 2023 would be where we would start to see some of the recruiting changes that you're going to see some kids coming in. And not that, I mean, she got some excellent recruits. I mean, all ranked in the ESPN top 100, the 4 freshmen that just came in. I'm not saying those are mid-level players. Brooklyn Miles may be the surprise of the class. I mean, that's a kid whose size people, they knock her down because of it. They don't rank her that high. She's got a motor that just doesn't quit. She's got attitude on that court. You got to have attitude when you're 5'4", and she and Jordan Walker have it, and that's a good thing for both of them.
I absolutely agree, and that was a perfect segue because before we closed out here, I was absolutely going to bring up recruiting because last time I had you on, we had a couple of people reach out who asked, "Hey, next time we have Maria on, can we talk about some recruiting?" And by the way, I don't think I mentioned at the top of the show, but most people I'm sure who are listening / watching know who you are, Maria, but in case you don't know, we've gotten to this point. Maria writes about Lady Vols for GoVols247. So if you don't know that's where you can find her work is on GoVols247 or at her Twitter account, which is M Cornelius. So follow her there. And then also, again, check out her stuff on the Tennessee 247 website. But that also brings me again to recruiting, because you also talk a lot about recruiting, what the Lady Vols are doing, who they're targeting and stuff. So for our listeners who may not, or viewers are, have you're taking this podcast, who may not have like their finger on the pulse of recruiting. You mentioned the 23 class. I know, I know some of the names, I guess a couple of the names, but I'm not, my finger isn't on the pulse as much as I would like it to be for Lady Vols recruiting. So, just quick breakdown. I don't want you to go into too much detail, but just kind of a quick breakdown of, how many players Lady Vols can take in this class, kind of who they're targeting, and kind of where you think things are going. And obviously, this is also taking into account the transfer portal. That's going to be something we're to play into in the offseason. So this is all with like a bunch of ifs and buts and all the stuff up in the air. Still, we have the fall signing period, which just happened with Justine signing already for the Lady Vols, which is huge. But here with the spring signing coming up, several months from now, and then with the transfer portal, what do you think the Lady Vols are, the coaching staff looking at the position wise to add, and who are some names that fans should be kind of keeping up with right now?
I'm going to do some math here, so bear with me. I've got
the numbers. The numbers are always fun. The numbers are what fans always like to know about, because they always want to know, how many can we add? Who how many scholarships are there? I know definitely in football, but I know in basketball it's the same thing. How many guys or how many girls can we take in a class?
And the one thing that I know this, but I've noticed some fans don't, is that women's basketball still is at a roster of 15. Men's obviously at 12, walk-ons. Women can go as high as 15. So I do some quick math. Tennessee has 14 on the roster right now. We know that Alexis Dye is out of eligibility. She's using her extra year. So that takes it down to 13. We know that Rae Burrell is ready for her to start, her next chapter of her life, professional basketball. Now, I always say, you never say never. I mean, what if the comeback, she has a setback, or, this is all things she would evaluate with her family and her agent and Tennessee in April. So, but let's just assume everything goes great. Rae Burrell's back on the floor being Rae Burrell. She's ready for the WNBA draft. So now you're down to 12. Kean Green, technically, I think Kean would have another year, but I don't know. I mean, she is in year 6 now of basketball. So let's say, Kean Green is ready for basketball to be in the rearview mirror. That would be, so now you're down to 11. Now, Jordan Walker, she's another one that technically would have an extra year, but she may be ready to move on. I mean, professional opportunities are not just in the WNBA, like Tennessee's, they've had some players go over the summer to like Cassie Kushkitawa. She was in Brazil in July, making money overseas playing basketball. So you don't, and you do that, and you hope that you get picked up eventually or into training camp for Lady Vol for WNBA. So let's just say you're down to 10, that you lose 4, and you may not. You may only lose 2. You got 1 coming in, Justine Passat, so that's 11. Technically, you could sign up to 4 in the class of 2023. As you mentioned, the wrinkle is the transfer portal. Do any of your current players leave? At this point, you can't be surprised if it happens. It is a common thing now across all programs that a player may opt to go somewhere else. Then you take a look at who's in it. Is there somebody in it that could help your team right away? I mean, because a proven senior you would bring in, and then you would recruit your freshmen knowing that they're going to, work their way into the program. So I would say anywhere from 2 to 4, probably 3 to 4, depending on the numbers. Obviously, one of the biggest there's several, and I'm just going to throw out some names. I mean, Ashlyn Shade would probably be the number 1 target at this point. She's made 2 unofficial visits here. That is the 5'9" guard out of Noblesville, Indiana. Lights out shooter. I mean, lights out, like Justine Passat. She's open when she steps off the bus. She is a phenomenal shooter. And imagine Tennessee right now with 2 or 3 3-point. Yeah.
Oh man, that's what they're missing. Yeah.
Yeah, Justine Passat, Tamari Key is probably going to roll out the red carpet for Justine Passat, because she's another one. She can shoot to 25 feet. She's open 25, 26 feet. So, and you extend the defense that far, Tamari Key's going to be in heaven. Olivia McGee, 6'2" guard out of, she's out of Mineral, Virginia. She released her top 11. It's full of top teams, and Tennessee is one of them. She released that on New Year's Day. Madison Booker, that's a 6'1" wing out of Ridgeland, Mississippi. Another player they're really interested in. Cadence Samuels, 6'1" guard out of Forestville, Maryland, is another one. Delaney Thomas, 6'2" forward out of Charlestown, West Virginia. couple posts, and Tennessee's going to definitely need posts. And if I'm a post player, I'm thinking, look at what Tamari Key is doing. Aaliyah Del Rosario, 6'6" post. She attends school near Nashville. I think it's actually Bell Buckle, but they're saying Nashville.
Okay.
It's the Webb School, but it's not the Webb School of Knoxville. So some people have gotten confused. Essence Cody, she's a 6'3" post out of Valdosta, Georgia. Chloe Clardy, she was recently here on a visit, 5'9" guard out of Conway, Arkansas. Some others I've heard, Corey Allen, 5'10" guard, Nashville. That's a legacy player. That's the daughter of Corey Allen, spelled Corey. She spells it Cory. A former Vol, Lene, and I don't have the pronunciations. It's Lenee, Beaumont, a 5'10" guard out of Illinois. These are people I'm tracking. I'm watching them. And I'm not saying that the Tennessee, it's everyone holds we'll take your commitment right now. You know, there's committable offers, there's wait and see, there's Jaden Donovan, 6' guard out of Washington. Amaya Ferguson, 5'9" guard out of St. Stephen, South Carolina. Malaysia Fawali, and please forgive me if I'm messing up these names. It's hard to find pronunciation guides for high school players.
Right. Yeah.
5'6" guard out of Columbia, South Carolina. Jada Harrison, a 5'8" guard out of Martin, Tennessee. Alyssa Latham, 6'1" forward out of Glenwood, Illinois. Samaya Nichols, 6' wing out of Overland Park, Kansas. Cassandra Prosper, 6'1" forward out of Quebec. Cadence Samuels, I think I mentioned her. Ashlyn Shea, Delaney Thomas, I mentioned her. Angelica Velez, a 5'7" guard out of the Bronx, New York. Michaela Williams, 6' guard out of Louisiana.
Yep, I know who she is.
And Soleil, I think it could be Williams. It's 5'9" guard out of Cincinnati, Ohio. I am not claiming one bit that is a complete list. It is a list that I've been able to pick up from social media posts and trying to track who's visiting or who's interested. There could be players who have already moved on, or Tennessee has already moved on, or players that I don't have. So please don't take that is a snapshot of what I know right now. It is a long way to go to signing day in November, so that list could change a whole lot. But Ashlyn Shade is an incredible player. I mean, that's a top 5 player, consensus top 5 player who can just absolutely shoot the basketball.
Yeah, that was
something about those Indiana kids that can flat out shoot.
They like to shoot the ball up in Indiana, so I get it. I'm glad you brought up Michaela, because that's someone I know from different work-related stuff. I know somebody down in Shreveport who keeps with athletic stuff there. So I've seen Michaela. She's a baller. I like you said, I don't know all her interest in Lady Vols or how interested they are in her, but that's someone I know where she goes. I think she'll have a bright future. Kim
Wilkie wants to keep her home too. I mean, that's the other thing with all these good teams and good coaches in the SEC. Recruiting is hard in the SEC.
Yeah, that was something too. Before we end here, I'm glad you kept talking and talk about the SEC, because that sparked something in my brain. What do you think of the new assistant coaches and their recruiting ties? Because I feel like, to me, I feel like recruiting has taken, like you said, I think it's also the culmination of this being the 3rd year under Coach Harper, and now recruits seeing the growth and development of these players. But I also think the 2 new assistants, especially Coach Williams, I feel like they have taken the recruiting to another level, in my opinion, at least from an offers and kind of what we've seen so far. I think they've hit an extra gear. Not trying to knock it, in the previous assistants or anything like that, but I just feel like the 2 new hires this offseason for Coach Harper, I feel like they've helped elevate the recruiting, at least where the Lady Vols are getting in with, and some of the players they're targeting, and being able to get these conversations and get on campus and stuff.
No, I agree. And like you, shout out to the 2 previous assistants. I mean, one obviously went to a head coaching job, at her absolute dream, went with Kelly's blessing. The other returned back to Arkansas to go back into the same position with Arkansas. And I mean, they only had a couple years with Kelly. And that's one thing you really like to see is the staff get stabilized. And that appears to be the case right now with Joy McCorvey and Samantha Williams. Joy McCorvey, of course, came out of Florida State. She was at Michigan. She was at St. John's. Samantha Williams, her history was Duke, Louisville. Then she was a head coach at a smaller school in Kentucky. I mean, I don't think she hesitated. Let's see, smaller school in Kentucky, the pinnacle of women's basketball. Okay, I'll go to Knoxville. And I mean, Samantha Williams is just, I mean, she's done this 20 something years.
I know, like I remember when the hire of her was announced, I thought that is a steal. I think she's going to be phenomenal. And so far, I think she's been very, very solid for this program.
And Kelly's directive, because I asked her about this over the summer. I mean, you're bringing in 2 new staff members, basically told them, we have got to get started now with 24s, 25s, 26, which they have done. Heck, they're even looking at 27s. Their basic approach was, we'll do what we can with 22, but we realize we are way behind on 22s. And they tried to catch up and got really close with a couple of players. Obviously, Justine Passat, she stuck around. She committed back to the old, to Lacey Goldwire was here and Kelly, of course, and she stayed with that commitment. And I mean, like Kelly said in that interview over the summer, it used to be your recruiting was more or less done in November. You would look at the JUCO ranks and, but you didn't look because they had to sit out a year for, until recently graduate transfers became a thing. And now they don't have to sit at all. But right now the transfer portal is your third wave of recruiting in that class. You've got, the summer recruiting and then the fall recruiting. And now you're into the spring of that year where you're looking at players that could be on your campus in 2 months and be ready to go, who are experienced ball players. And the transfer portal has completely upended how you recruit. And that's part of it. It's not going away. So you got to adapt and figure it out. And I mean, look at the 3 they have, 3 graduate transfers that are tremendous. I mean, Jordan Walker, Alexis Dyer starting, and Keegan Green is like a 6th starter. I mean, she comes in and makes an immediate difference. So Tennessee is a better team right now because of the transfer portal.
Yeah, I was just about to say, look at how the transfer portal has really affected Lady Vols, both positive and negatively. You just mentioned, 3 positives there with the players that are, currently on the team that are starting, or like you said, playing key roles off the bench. But you also look at who transferred off this team over the last few years with, with the coaching change and also just other stuff happening too. But like the transfer portal has been instrumental in how we have viewed the Lady Vols, in the Kelly Harper era, and how the story has been written for them, whether, positive or negative. And I think that's hopefully more positive than negative moving forward. But you're absolutely right. I don't have in my mind that I think is going to transfer off this team, but I think it's going to happen because it's very rare nowadays to not have at least one player transfer off your team, whether it's because they want to be closer to home or they want more minutes somewhere, or they're just not a good fit, or, whatever. There's a multitude of reasons why a player can transfer. It isn't always a selfish reason, or isn't always the coach doesn't like them reason. There's all kinds of different reasons why a player transfers, but I think you at least have one player transfer off the roster and you'll probably bring one more in. So, and they've had success, this coaching staff has so far with the transfers they brought in. I don't expect every transfer you bring in to be a superstar. You look at Alexis Dias, has started all 14 games this year, has had multiple doubles, is averaging 10 and 8 right now. You look at Jordan Walker, who started all 14 games so far, is averaging 7 points and 4 rebounds, and I think almost 5 assists per game, or a little over 4 assists per game, excuse me. And then, like you said, Keegan Green, been a key piece off the bench, has played in all 14 games, averaging 7.5 points and 3.5 rebounds. So, I mean, and she's also blocked a few shots and everything too, and gotten a few steals. So she's been a key player. And again, obviously Alexis Dye and Walker being starters have been very key players too, and have played 25 to 26 minutes a game just about. So Maria, we could talk for a lot longer, but I think, give you your time back here in the evening, and I'll kind of get this stuff edited and posted up here Monday night. But it's been an absolute pleasure again having you on. I can't wait to see what happens in the next few weeks, Lady Vols, and especially I've had this circled on my calendar for, ever since the game was announced, but I cannot wait. It's just 3 days after my birthday for February 6th when it's Tennessee and UConn up in Connecticut. I cannot wait for that game. That's been like the game I've been the most excited about this whole basketball season. Maybe even men's and women's both combined. That might be the game I'm most excited about. So I think that week I would plan ahead another month and ahead here, but I think that week would be one I'd love to have you back on to talk about that game. But, let everybody know, I just mentioned earlier where they can find your work, but let everybody know stuff you have out now, anything else you want to plug or anything like that. Cause it's been great to have you on here again.
No, I appreciate it. You mentioned the Twitter. I'm a prolific Twitterer. I have over 100,000 tweets. I've been on there since 2009. I told people I don't know whether to congratulate myself for 100,000 tweets or apologize for it. But yeah, GoVols247. There's a Summit message board there. The Summit board is a premium board. A lot of the stories are free. I tell people, click on the stories. It drives interest in women's sports. It shows interest in women's sports. So appreciate that. And Nathanael, you know how to reach me. Anytime you need me, you just shoot me a text and I'm happy to come on and talk women's basketball with you. I appreciate you doing this.
Absolutely. I'm loving having a Lady Vols specific podcast and getting to talk about it with people who obviously to me are a lot more knowledgeable than I am, because it's nice having you. It's been nice having Cora Hall, who covers for Knox News, and having Kellyanne on a few weeks ago too. So I feel like it's just nice to have experts come on and talk about things that they know what they're talking about with. So it's been very nice. And again, appreciate you having on, and appreciate all our listeners and all our viewers here. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, give this video a like, turn on the bell for notifications. I didn't mention that earlier. Got to do all the YouTube stuff now. Subscribe to the video and the channel while you're here. And again, share it with everybody. If you're listening to the podcast, just the audio, again, thank you all so much. You can find us everywhere podcasts are found. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, you name it, we're there. Give us a 5-star rating on all those. And follow on social media also at Vol Hoops Fever on Twitter and Vol Basketball Fever on Facebook. Signing off for Maria, I'm Nathanael, and this has been another episode of the Lady Vol Basketball Fever podcast. Thank you for listening to the Vol Basketball Fever podcast. Subscribe to the show so you'll never miss another episode.